as you all know, we're hosted by the Duluth Area Family YMCA. That means we place our members both in the Y's after school programs and in our partner sites, which we all appreciate all of you, whether that's a housing center, a drop-in center, a school day position. Really, we're trying to serve as many youth as possible. So we are an education-based program. We focus on social emotional learning, as well as supporting your enrichment programming that's already happening. And we serve anywhere from grades K through 8. We've been a part of Community Services Branch since 2003. So this is our 20th year, yay. And there's some nice synergy happening. AmeriCorps at the federal level this year is turning 30. So 30 and 20. So we will have a celebration event this year, and I will be sending you information about that later. Your member's essential functions. So we've talked a lot about like the rules and regulations and having that member, but here's their essential functions. The member is placed to help build the capacity at your site. Their focus is going to be social emotional learning interventions. They're going to respond to those teachable moments. Maybe they bring in new ways to work on different competencies like self-awareness, responsible decision-making. Maybe they do this in small group check-ins. Maybe they do it start and end of the day with your youth. Maybe they greet them coming off the bus. They're really that person that's there to help them build those social skills. We always say social emotional learning skills are the skill sets you need to be a good citizen. And I'm sure we've all met not only kids, but adults that need a few more of these skills, right? So that's what they're there to do. They're there to help support your youth gain these skills. They also are going to assist your staff with enrichment programming, whatever that looks like at your site. We really want the member to be embedded in your service and supporting you the way you need it. So, you know, they can build in these SEL skill sets at any point in the enrichment programming, working alongside with your staff and supporting them building that capacity. We really want them to be building relationships with the youth at their site. This last year, we were really excited. We used DESA Aperture Curriculum and Assessment. It's an assessment tool that happens 3 times in the year. And across our cohort, we saw a 75% increase in students' SEL skill sets from the start of the year when compared to youth that weren't with AmeriCorps members. So this really does make a huge impact in your youth. SEL skills, as I'm sure you all know, lead to higher graduation rates, reduced criminal behavior, and a higher quality of life. And seeing this 75% increase is huge. So we're so excited to be seeing that increase. So your member is going to use evidence-based resources to facilitate these. So when we say evidence-based, it means either that Aperture system that we provide training and access to, or your own site-based resources as well. Maybe you already have some curriculum in place or programming in place that you feel meets this need. As long as you feel like you can train them and have them facilitate that, that's cool. Really program integration, having them model these skill sets for your youth, those individual check-ins, those small group activities, or those teachable moments for minor instances is really how we see these interventions taking place. We as a program identify an intervention as 15 minutes or more of intentional time with youth, whether it's one-on-one or in a group setting. So I'm just going to go through a few scenarios, and I might even ask some of you to read out as well if you're feeling comfortable or caffeinated. So SEL intervention school-based, how could this look? So working with a social worker or school counselor to provide additional SEL support to youth in small groups, pull out lessons or push into the classroom. They use the school-based curriculum, best practices, and DESA. So an example of what that could look like is with Shamia. Does anyone want to read this slide out?
I can read it.
Thanks, Rachel.
A former AmeriCorps member from Lincoln Park there. Teachers have identified that Shamia often struggles to handle her big emotions. The members' schedule is arranged so they check in at the start of the day and midday during specialists. The member checks in about emotions, reinforces second step lessons, and facilitates Aperture at interventions based on the DESA results.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's kind of how that could be facilitated at a school day center. You know, they've identified this youth and your member is helping check in throughout the day. That one consistent adult can make a huge difference in a youth's life. Let's look at school-based interventions as well. So support identified students with SEL skill building activities and enrichment during unstructured times, such as lunch and recess. Additional check-in times with students during the day and or after school. So another way that this could look, we've got another example. Does anyone want to read this one out?
School staff have identified that many students in first grade struggle with taking turns at recess, often leading to fights. The member plans and leads intentional games during recess, inviting students to participate and reinforcing relationship skills.
Thanks, Russ. I knew you'd come through for me at some point. Yeah, so another example of how, that unstructured time can be really difficult for youth, especially if there's a lot going on in their personal life. So just having that member there kind of help facilitate those relationships and those games can be a huge way to make that unstructured time that is unproductive and conflict really suddenly a much more productive time. And our last example is after school interventions. So planning and facilitate whole group or small group SEL and daily structured activities such as brain time or circle time, intentionally supporting caseload students during free choice times. So does anyone want to read this example here?
I can read that one, Haley. The member completes DESSA on all students in after-school care program and sees there's an overall need in self-management. The member plans and leads different mindfulness activities for students to complete during the structured activity time.
Thank you. Yeah, so you're seeing that there's a need for that self-management and they're able to kind of build on those lesson plans. I always like to see this kind of example of like the member being like, oh, I see this need, and coming to either you, the site supervisor, or the other staff, and having an idea and having to be like, that would be great during circle time. We'd love that. So again, really your member is there to help build that capacity of your staff and the youth at your site. So we're going to do a little breakout session here, and I want you to discuss how you feel your member is going to fit into your site. Thinking about how it's unique. So again, how we talked about how like they don't count ratio, they're building that capacity. So really what's appropriate and what's less appropriate for your member. Appropriate would be planning and prepping and leading some of the activities. We always say they're not doing 100% and they're not doing 0%, right? They're really embedded with your staff. They're supporting you, but they're not taking over and they're not taking a backseat. Helping manage and document those behaviors like Maria talked about, but they're not the only adult counted in ratio, and they're not a para. They're not trained, for very, very high needs. They're kind of, again, that building that capacity for those youth that are maybe on the fringe. They're checking in with their caseload students during the program. So caseload students are like 20 to 30 youth that you've identified that have those high unmet needs. And they're facilitating check-ins with them. Office hours from site before or after program. So they're not doing office hours from home primarily, and also they're not leaving program to do office hours, right? We hire and train our members to be direct service, right? They're not office workers. While there is some data that they have to collect, really they should be with the youth in your program supporting them. They're not leaving for that. And tracking, reporting student data at site, and they're following confidentiality best practices. So that's just how we're thinking about how their role is appropriately embedded into your program. A little bit of non-duplication, non-displacement, and I'm sure I've talked to all of you about this because we did kind of our check-in meetings with everybody, but if you're new, non-duplication, non-displacement, essentially a member's role cannot take away or harm an employee, such as reduction in hours, termination, or replacement. So that's really when you're thinking about what you're asking your member to do, thinking about, is it supplemental, building that capacity, or complementary, other activities? So like one example, it's summer, so I'm thinking of Camp Miller. They were talking about how after lunch, sometimes they do these little breakout clubs that's optional. It's like free time for youth. And they're like, can the member make their own club during that time if there's like another staff present? Absolutely, that's complementary, right? A staff is not required to do that. The youth are able to choose those clubs and activities, and so the member can definitely implement and facilitate a club during that time. What we wouldn't want to see is them taking over an entire like required session by themselves. So I think using your best logic and common sense with that, but really thinking that they don't count in ratio, that they're there to support your staff. They can help alongside some of those like menial tasks as long as you're there and supporting them and it's not taking over their role. So I've got a couple examples for us to go through it and a chance to chat about it. So going to put you back in those breakout rooms again. These are the 2 prompts I would like to see you chat about. So 1, the site supervisor needs to put some books away before the next group arrives. The member is there and offers to help. They work together and the book gets shelved faster. Is this allowed? And 2, a youth falls and breaks a leg. The member is the witness to the incident. Site policy requires an incident report to be completed. The site supervisor asks the member to do this because they were the witness. Is this allowed? So I'm going to put these both in the chat once I get you in your group, so you'll see that come through, and just have a chat. Do you think it's allowed? How would you navigate it, etc.? And what were your thoughts on scenario 1? Brave soul want to share?
We weren't sure we had all the information.
Yeah.
If this has to do with a political event or a fundraiser, then nope. I think if it's if you're working with them, I think that's the yes. I think the point is we don't want to leave these folks high and dry and assign them things outside their task. But we also talked about the member in September is a little bit greener than the member in April, May. So there is some growth opportunities then, but you have site visits by then and some conversations. But for the most part, putting books away for programming works, but not for fundraising.
I love that you brought in the prohibited activities. So yeah, you're exactly right, Russ. Yes, it's a one-time occurrence. Like you said, it's not taken away from their essential functions. The staff is doing it alongside them. So probably chatting with them, working with them. And no one's being displaced by this. So that's the big thing, right? It's not like someone's one job is to put away books and the member is taking that job away from them. So I think you're exactly right. Yes, the member can do this. As long as it's not for a fundraiser or a political event, you nailed it. Yep, they can definitely do this. What did you guys think about scenario 2? It's a wee bit tricky.
I think I
So
remember.
writing, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, writing reports might be seen as like a staff essential function. So we discussed that AmeriCorps members are often asked to write like witness statements and then have staff fill out the actual forms.
Yes, exactly. So no, the member shouldn't be doing it on their own. But yeah, like you said, if you see here, they can assist in completing the form. The site supervisor completes the form, but asks the member to help because they were the witness. Witness statement, help report that, exactly. But it should be the staff's role, right? Because if the member didn't do it, would a staff have to do it? Yeah, so then they can help, but they shouldn't do it on their own.
Cool. We also talked a little bit, oh, sorry, go ahead, Leslie.
You go ahead. Those goes.
I just said we also talked a little bit about the complexities of the collaboration here. We're all going to need all of the information here, all of the incident reports. It's a Y employee. If they witness, the Y's got to have all of their information for their policies. And some of them, like we had Emily with Carleton County, and it's multiple. So if there is an incident like this having to do with medical or having to do, it's going to be a lot of work, and you just can't hand it off to an AmeriCorps member because you want to keep all of your entities risk-free in this.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Russ.
The other thing that that our group talked about is the fact that you can't play telephone. So I think if it's a broken leg, each person that was there that was a witness needs to fill out an incident report. You can sit with the AmeriCorps member, but really you want it in their view of what happened and not they're telling you and then you're filling it out. I mean, you need that first person incident, and hopefully they're not the only witness, you know, because there's youth witnesses, there's staff witnesses, especially with, like Russ said, something that's this serious with a broken leg. They shouldn't be by themselves with the kid anyway. So there should be at least one staff with them.
Yep.
And so that staff member should also be filling out an incident report. So there's multiple incident reports happening. Yes,
absolutely. Yep. 100%. Yeah. And like you guys all touched on, these areas always get complex. But use your best judgment and best practice to make sure that the member is supported in that. And like you said, positive communication, right? We don't want to just assume that the AmeriCorps member knows everything, right? We want to be in communication. Cool. Any other thoughts on this? I feel like there's one other question that was maybe meditated on. or thought? Cool. If something comes up, put it in the chat. I wanted to touch a bit on member benefits because your members contracted through True North AmeriCorps. We handle all of their benefits. So if they ever have a question on member benefits, they can reach out to me. Essentially, they get their living allowance, their education award, health insurance if they're full-time, childcare if they're full-time, and a free family YMCA membership. That all comes through, True North and the Y. So if they ever have questions, feel free to reach out to me. The big thing to note is that you as a site cannot provide additional monetary compensation to your member or employ the member during their term of service. So they shouldn't be ending their service because you've hired them, right? Unless it's a successful finish and they've finished their service and then you're hiring them, that kind of training staff pipeline. We love to see our members move forward with that, but we want to see them move forward successfully. So just, no additional monetary compensation and not employing them during their service. That would break their contract. Thoughts on member role?